Alrighty, hopefully folks can hear me okay. I know I have started kind of right on the dot at 6, so there might not be anyone joining right away, but I wanted to get started with being able to talk a little bit about what we are going to be doing today. And so, a couple different steps we're going to be taking. Firstly, we are going to be making our own punch cradles. So, as a reminder, here is what a punch cradle looks like. And I'm still getting used to kind of the dual camera view, so I apologize if it is off at all or if I'm still trying to figure it out. But here is what a punch cradle typically looks like. There's a lot of different versions and variations of this. Essentially, what it does is it helps us make sure we have nice, even lines where we are actually punching our signatures. To give you an example, here is a quarto that I was just making, and you can see the holes are fairly lined up. They're not the neatest, but that's what a punch cradle does, is it helps us get them nice and aligned. Now, there's different versions of this. There are different patterns of holes that you might be using, and it all really comes down to the type of bind that you're making, right? The holes that I need, for example, for this Remain Nameless bind are not the same as I need for this quarto size bind or that I need for this little sextodecimo bind. And so it really depends on what you're binding, what the needs are, and the holes need to basically line up with that. And so different versions of this, you can see I have made my own pattern for these holes. And there is also a way of just making it at home yourself. Okay, and so there's a way of making this yourself if you don't want to go and buy one of these, right? I bought this for about, I think, $15 when it was on sale for Black Friday. And it came with a whole bunch of things like different thread as well as a awl, but really you don't need one of these by any means. You can go ahead and make one, which is what we'll be doing together today. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. Okay, so you'll be making one of these with me today, and we'll be having the pattern that we will need for a very large bind on our specific punch cradle. All right, and so we'll be doing that as well as actually punching holes in our signatures. And that is kind of our goal for today. I had originally planned for us to also stitch the signatures together, and I'm going to skip that. I think this is enough work for 1 week, especially considering that the whole purpose of this is to make sure we're not being too eager with how quickly we move, really giving us time to do it. And so we'll go ahead and punch holes in this after we make our cradle. And of course, this is assuming that you haven't already gone out and bought a punch cradle already. If you haven't, you can watch along for this portion. If you have, you can skip ahead essentially once the slide is posted. Alrighty, and so all you're going to need for this is a piece of chipboard. Now I mentioned this as part of the materials that you would need for making the case of our binds, and it's the same chipboard that you're going to be using for that. I do recommend getting one that's just a teensy bit thicker than the thinner chipboard that we talked about, and that's because this is going to help us maintain our shape and structure when we stick it into our signatures and poke holes into it. You can see before I got my punch cradle, there were kind of these indentations because of where I was punching in. And so we need something that will hold up underneath that. Now, what I have here, my piece of chipboard, as you can see, is really it is a leftover chipboard from another bind that I had made, which is why I always tell folks, don't throw your chipboard away. Don't throw anything away, really. Just hold on to all your materials. If it is more than just a tiny sliver, you can reuse that. You can reuse those materials. So I have this here. You can feel free to use whatever chipboard you have on hand. And the way that we're going to do this, I'll keep this next to us for our template to see what it should be looking like and coming out to. But essentially, we're just going to cut out a L shape here like we have on this punch cradle. And you really just need about 1/2 inch, maybe 1/4 of an inch on each side to make this. And so let's see, I'm going to go ahead and doesn't have to be anything precise by any means. And so we have 1/2 an inch on this side. I'm going to cut the L out. And the length of this, you really want it to be the length of your signature, whatever that is. This right here was the entire length of a piece of chipboard when I had originally made it. So I believe it's about 11 inches probably. So I'm just going to go all the way to the bottom and use that up. We're going to go 1/2 an inch here. And then we are also going to do, let's see, 1/2 an inch up here. Alrighty. And so you can see I'm just going to measure this out approximately like that and go all the way down. This isn't long enough. And all the way down this way. And that's it. We just need an L shape, right? You can see it's not the straightest by any means. I don't think that lines up with this down here. That's okay. We again just need it to make our holes. And so once we have this, what you're going to do is cut it out using a some kind of X-Acto knife or box cutter. I'm going to grab mine. Try not to move the camera too much. Okay. Alrighty. So I have my X-Acto my knife right here, and I'm going to just start cutting it out. And the easiest way, this is going to come in handy when you make your covers as well, the easiest way to cut through this chipboard is to do light strokes when you go in, because if you push in too deep, it's inevitably you're going to go off course. It's happened to me a bunch of times. Don't make the same mistake I've made. Just learn from what I've done. So you pick that up, the light strokes, and just cut through it. And I'm not cutting all the way through to the end because I want this L shape here. Okay. You've probably also noticed I have a mat underneath my chipboard, and that's because I don't want to cut through to the table. I have done that in the past. Would not recommend, especially if it's a working surface that you really love. Just get like a piece of cardboard or something to put underneath it. It doesn't have to be a mat. Okay. And then I'm going to cut through this right here. And once you have that groove, you don't even really need a straight edge. You can just safely go through. Okay. I see that folks are joining us. I'm not able to see who's joining though, but welcome. It's good to see y'all. We are currently in the stage of just making our punch cradle. Would it be helpful for me to go back and talk a little bit more about what we're doing today? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm going to keep going until I see something dropped in the chat. Alrighty. So we have our template punch cradle that I was comparing to, and this is the one that we're making together. You can see this is just a teensy bit longer here. That's okay. It's not the end of the world. The point of this right here, let me open this up and show you what it does. Essentially, we want the punch cradle to sit like this and guide where we're going to be making holes. Right? So if you look at this one, We just poke holes at different points, so that's the same thing we're going to do with this new one that we're making. All right, now, like I had mentioned, the holes that you make really just differ from bind to bind that you're making. Obviously, something that's the small is not going to need the same number of holes as my Remain Nameless bind, but what we're going to do right now is assuming that you have a really large bind like the one that I have here, right? This is a thick, thick bind, really long, thick. You will probably want to use something similar to mine, but if you have a smaller, shorter fic, you probably don't need the same, am I saying the same holes as I'm going to be making today, and that's okay. I have another video up for shorter fics, anything kind of 1 inch or less. You can easily just follow along that other video. I'll try to link it later once this is posted, but it's in my other bind along series. But if you're doing something really large with this bind along, like Manacled or Remain Nameless or whatever it might be, it's going to do you a little bit of benefit just to follow along similar to what I'm doing with my holes. Okay, so here is, I'm going to write it down so folks can see right here what we're going to measure out. So we're going to start out with our first line at 0.75 inches, and everything I do is going to be in inches. I apologize. I am located in America, and I have this tendency to do all of my measurements in inches. Okay. And these are where we are going to punch our holes into our signature, and I'll show you how we do that today as well. But these are all the lines that we want to make. And so I recommend getting some kind of marker or Sharpie when you're actually making these lines. I should have grabbed one beforehand. I'm going to go ahead and just use, let's see. Not that, that is a nice pen. I'm going to go ahead and just use a pen for today, but I'd recommend getting a marker or a Sharpie of some kind. Alrighty. And so I'm just going to measure and go along. And again, it doesn't have to be precise. Everything we do, it really is going to be kind of an estimate, at least in these initial phases. And if you ever make a mistake in measuring things, you can always go back and fix it or redo it or just scratch it out. You can see on this one, I've whited out something previously because it was the wrong measurement and that I didn't need it. Okay, so 4.75. And that is going to be our last hole right there. Okay. And then you do it on the other side as well, just because you want to make sure it is lining up when you draw across. So let's see. Okay. Alrighty. And then after you're done with that, you're just going to draw the line across to finish it up. Really is much easier with a Sharpie or a marker. So that is our punch cradle. It's not as easy to see as the other one because I haven't used a marker, but these lines are telling us where we want to make holes in our signature. And that's all it does. It doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it works really well when you want to just use something that you have at home, as well as with creating other lines and patterns. You can just easily draw on and measure different pieces on here. So here is what we are going to do next. So we have our punch cradle and we have our fic that we're binding. So in this case, I am binding Remain Nameless. And I always like to start from the back. It's just really a personal preference. And as you can see, I still have not printed out my entire fic and folded it. So this is what we had from working last time, but we're going to go ahead and just start from the back and work our way forward. And so what happens is when you pick up that first signature, you're going to poke a hole through. You just find the, let's see, middle. So that middle signature where you, or page where the signature folds, right? So this is the middle, as you can see. And I started kind of poking in here as well just to make sure my measurements were right before I logged on here live. But what you do next is you stick in your, see, and that doesn't look right. And this is when we pause and we ask ourselves, what did we do wrong? Because this is not right here. So now I'm going to go ahead and just use a different pen and make markings again because I know this is all messed up. And so I'm glad that I caught it before actually going ahead. And I apologize again for not having caught it before, but I've started using this now and haven't used one of these in a while, which is why I have messed this up. So just pause for a second here. If you're making your own punch cradle, don't make a mistake like I did. You're going to start your measurement from here. So instead of starting up here, you're going to work here, and it'll be the same exact numbers that I had given you if you're doing a fic as long as mine. So instead of starting up here again, you'll do here and just work your way down. Now I already have similar measurements on this one, so I'm not gonna go back and do this twice, but here is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna use the previous template I had and just work my way through with that one. Alrighty, so you stick it in with the correct measurements like this one has. And after that, just get it into whatever position is comfortable for you. I prefer to just have it open like this. You want to put something down towards the back. If you don't have a mat, that's perfectly fine. Go ahead and use the chipboard or whatever leftover like cardboard you have and just stick it under. And the reason for that is when you poke through with this awl, it's pretty sharp, right? And it's going to hit whatever's at the end. And if the thing at the end is not absorbent, if it's not going to collect the awl and have a little bit of give, you're going to notice kind of that pushback every time. I don't know if I'm explaining it best, but make sure, I promise it'll be easier, make sure you have something behind, like cardboard or a cutting mat, that will absorb a little bit of the blow from the awl. All right, so I have my cutting mat. I'm not going to use the chipboard. You open it up, you stick your punch cradle in, and you take the awl, and you just start at the part where you have your lines. So you start punching, and especially if your fic is as thick as mine is, like if your signatures are as thick, I think mine are about 10 or 12 pages, you're going to have to push pretty hard and get it in there. And I like to rotate my awl around just a little bit to make sure the hole doesn't disappear after some time. So you can see here, let me bring it up to the camera. This is a nice thick hole. We're not going to have trouble with this later when we try to go in and sew it up. All right. And we just keep doing that. We just keep going in. And what you would do if you made your own punch cradle is you would follow these lines. I am following kind of these smaller lines here because these line up with the measurements that I had given y'all. And just poke, stick in through the back, and just twist a little. And it looks easy enough, and it is, but once you start doing a lot of different signatures, especially signatures that are as thick as this one, your fingers and your knuckles can start hurting. And so just be gentle with yourself. Take your time. And just thinking through kind of next steps as well and what we do with this. So all these holes that we're making is where we sew and make our stitches through. And so just thinking through kind of what that looks like, we're going to be doing a lot of French links in this bind along, at least this time around that I'm going through. This is not the only way to stitch something up, but it really is one of the ways that I found works best for a very thick and large fic. And as anyone who has read Remain Nameless knows and can see the bind in front of me, it is very large, and the French links just make it sturdier. They give it a better composition. Alrighty, so that's one. So you can see some of them already started kind of closing up again. That's okay. We'll go through it with a needle when we stitch it, but that's it right there. Up. Alrighty. I'm just taking a second here to check a message that I received. Alrighty. Okay, and then we take the next one and we stick our punch cradle in. And I just want to confirm, is what I'm saying making sense? Would it be helpful for me to slow down at all or repeat some of what I've said? Let me know what would be helpful. You can tell I am struggling to get it in there. Alrighty. And this is only the second signature that I'm going through. So be gentle with yourself, be patient, and take breaks if you need to. And I think I might only do one or two more on here, after which I'm going to go ahead and pause because it really is just a repetitive kind of part that we're doing of this binding process of just poking holes through. And you'll have to push down on the signature as well and the all. And what you'll notice is after a while, this can start to get dull. This is one that I've been using not even that frequently, and it's already harder to push through. So just something to keep in mind. Like if you're using something older, it could be a little bit more challenging to push through as well. Alrighty. Oh, let's see, I have a comment. May have missed this, but at what measurements do you suggest poking holes for? Yeah, good question. So I did go through that. Let me show you real quick. And I made a mistake as well on the one that I had initially done. So I'm glad that you actually kind of missed that part. But here it is. So I recommend for 3 French links, which is what we will be doing, you're going to make essentially at every 1 inch mark, starting at 0.75, you will make a marking. And so I tried to do that here, and the mistake that I made that I don't want you to make, Leslie, I started measuring at the top, which I had forgotten. You don't want to do that, right? You want to start measuring right here. So whatever 0.75 inches is from this point here downwards. And the reason for that is when we stick the punch cradle in, you'll see that the measurement from here doesn't even matter because really you're hitting that top of the page right at this point. And so you start measuring right here, 0.75, measure every 1 inch, and it should hit at 0.75 again at the bottom. Let me know if that makes sense. And I'll leave that there. Hopefully it's visible. Let me know if you would prefer for me to explain differently or if that didn't make sense. I'm happy to do so. And also to avoid any confusion, the lines that you see here are from another punch cradle that I've made. You can reuse the punch cradles that you make and add lines in different colors so that you know what color coincides with like what type of stitch that you're doing. And one can be reused many different times. I'm just not using this one because I didn't want to redraw the lines, but I have the same measurements that I had shared here on this punch cradle here that I'm pushing in. Oh, good. I'm glad. Which fic are you binding, Leslie? And oh, here's a good learning lesson. Okay, so I poked a hole in the wrong place because I'm following these really tiny lines that I've made on a previous punch cradle. And so I poked a hole here instead of where I wanted to, which is about 0.25 inches above. If that happens, don't even worry about it. This hole will close back up eventually, which is why I'm telling you to really twist them, right? Even if you twist it, it might close back up. And so you can just poke the hole where you initially intended to anyways, and that's fine as well. Just have to kind of remember when you're going through and stitching that there were potentially mistakes made, and so stitching can sometimes be one of the parts of the process that you really need to pay attention to just to avoid any additional mistakes. Okay, you stick it in, and that's the last one. This is why I hate thick signatures. It is really hard to poke holes, but it does make the process easier when you have a really large fic. So there it is. That's the one where I made a mistake. You can barely even see it. I can almost guarantee it'll close up. And I'm just pushing it back down to close it up as well. So we open to the middle. Oh, here's something else. I have seen folks in the Discord asking about like imperfections as well as things on the pages that aren't very nice. And you can see here, I have one on page 502. This right here, it's messy. The ink got smudged with the printer, messing it up. I always, like, when I'm making binds for myself, for my personal bookshelf, I lean towards the philosophy of like imperfections are fine. We're making handmade products, and it really is. It's part of the process. It shows that it was made with love. It was handmade, not just through a factory somewhere, right? You put an effort and thought into this. And so when there are imperfections, I always encourage folks just go with it. It's totally okay. Now, if you're making this for someone else, you might want to be a little bit more careful. If it's a gift or an exchange or a trade that you're making, then I would say go ahead and reprint the page and just save this as scrap paper. I do remember you mentioning that, Leslie, that you were working on Oops, I Joined the Good Guys. So I meant to tell you, I had measured my copy of Oops, and if you're using the typeset by BRB binding, mine was actually, I think, less than 1 inch, so I didn't even need to round that one. It was just a very straightforward kind of bind without having to do anything special to the spine. But that'll, of course, depend on the type of paper you're using as well. If you're using thicker paper or heavier weight, I should say, then it might be a teensy bit larger, but mine I think came out to about 0.75 inches. And you can see I'm working backwards as well. As long as you get the holes in there, it does not matter. It doesn't matter. All right, so I have another one done. And the way that I like to stack them, just to make sure that I am not going to get them in the wrong order, I like to just put them one on top of the other to make sure they're staying in the correct signature order. That way there aren't any mix-ups, but we'll pay attention to that when we're stitching it as well. I just need to charge my, let's see, laptop. Okay. Yeah, if you're using BRB bindings, it may not even need to be rounded. It might be short enough that you can get away without rounding. I do also want to show you what it looks like to use a punch cradle. I've realized after doing this for some time with a handmade punch cradle, I actually really like having a punch cradle that I've purchased, and makes it just a teensy bit easier when I'm binding. Not a whole lot, but just a little bit. Enough that it was worth it for me to invest in one. And you can see how much pressure I'm putting in by how much the mat is moving. It does need a lot of... Okay, there we go. And I'm really going to have to go in and print out the rest of my pages. I have been putting it off and been lazy, but when we start stitching next week, it's going to need to get done. I also remember I was worrying about how thick this fic is, but after pressing it, it really, it feels much more doable. I think with some good rounding, it should be okay. I unfortunately don't have a way to back my fix yet, my binds yet, I should say, and that really stinks. But I also don't want to invest like $100, probably more, if I'm being honest, in a backing press. So we just do with rounding in this house. And I'm probably gonna, let's see, have this be the last one that I do together because it is really just a repetitive process of poking holes. And you just go in and you poke them. And then next week, when we meet again, we're gonna go ahead and actually stitch them up together. And even if you, I should have mentioned when I said that, oops probably doesn't need to be rounded, especially the typeset by BRB binding. But that doesn't mean you can't do 3 French links anyways. There's nothing saying that you can't do a specific type of stitch. I just find that the French link is the most sturdy, and having 3 of them is much better for me. Like, it's worked out better in the past when I've done large binds. And this is why I'm going to stop after this one. I am struggling to get it in there. There we go. All right. And that's it. And you can see they've kind of started closing up already. I bet we're going to meet back next week, and I'm going to have a really hard time stitching this up because of the holes having closed up. But it is what it is. Okay. So once you are done, I'm clearly not done yet with punching holes, but once you're done, you should hopefully have something that stacks up nicely with the way that you had started and finished. So it would be kind of, again, back to front. And once you're done with that, you can go ahead and just stick it in a press. You, by no means, this is again me being mindful of like the timeline with the bind along, but by no means do you have to actually stick this in the press after you have finished punching holes. Like, if I was normally doing a bind, if I had time and energy and wherewithal to continue binding, I would just start stitching it up. And after stitching it up, I would then stick it in the press. But because of the bind along and how we're moving through this process, I'm not going to be stitching anything right now. I am going to be just sticking this in the press once I finish the rest of the holes. And that way, it's going to continue to remove any swell that we have, and that's been added by us punching holes. Alrighty. And so when we meet back next week, a couple different things that we're going to need. The first one being thread, preferably wax thread, but really any kind of thread will work. A needle of some kind. I use a curved needle like I had shown y'all in one of my prior videos. Again, that's just my preference. You can use a normal old needle that you have lying around at home, and that's fine as well. You will also need something heavy to weigh down the signatures while you're actually stitching up, and that will help keep them nice and in place while you're stitching so they don't shift around too much. Let's see, what else will you need? And if you're rounding your spine like me, you're also going to need linen tapes specifically to stick through the French links when we actually stitch. And I see that we have more folks who've joined us. I was actually just wrapping up for today, but I'm happy to stay on longer. Are there additional pieces that might be helpful, or would folks like to go through the process again? Please feel free to let me know in the chat. Tell me what would be helpful. But if I don't see anything in the chat, maybe in the next 1 or 2 minutes, I am going to call it a day because I was essentially just punching holes at this point through signatures. So feel free to let me know if there's something specific you want to talk about or if you want me to review the process again. I'll keep punching until then. This is how I know I need to take a pause. I just cannot get it through because of how tired I'm feeling. And I'm poking holes all over the place. All right. Okay, I'm not seeing anything dropped in the chat. I'm going to assume that means it's okay for me to log off and go ahead and pause the tutorial for this week. Again, this is more helpful if you're doing a very large bind. If you're doing something shorter, you don't want to stick around and rewatch this whole